Another area of the Urantia that needs to be discussed is the actual revelation of the Urantia, or the claimed revelation of the Urantia. I consider this a big problem for the Urantia. John 4:23 and 4:24, you know, but the hour cometh, and now is, when the true worshipers shall worship the Father in spirit and in truth. In other words, John is telling us here that Jesus is gone, the Spirit is here, and we worship Him in the Spirit, by the Spirit, for everything in God is through the Spirit. And the Spirit, as Jesus told us in John 15:26, even the Spirit of truth, which proceedeth forth out of God the Father. So, Spirit and truth, that's what Spirit and truth is. Now, John 4:24 follows it up and says, God is a spirit, and they that worship Him must worship Him in spirit and in truth. So, truth is also a way that we can determine whether something is of God or not of God. If it is not true, it is not of God. The Urantia has some bad demonstration concerning truth. Now, I'm going to keep this short. I don't want to kick dirt. That's not what I'm here for. I'm just going to make some real quick. Dr. Sadler made numerous alterations to the Urantia papers before, during, and after it's being published. Dr. Sadler states in the preface that the book was recorded and certified with only minor grammatical errors, such as spelling and punctuation. However, the following truths are evident, making Dr. Sadler's statement untrue. So, he who perpetrated, he who pushed it, the major proponent of the Urantia, is a liar. Human sources after the published date were incorporated into the text. This demonstrates that Sadler himself had no issue plagiarizing material for use in the Urantia, which was not sourced from the superhuman celestials that supposedly provided the rest of the material. This also demonstrates and disproves his editorial statement that all they did was fix the spelling and punctuation. They added whole new stories into it after it was published. Now, it also demonstrates dishonesty in authorship. After the original printing, they also had additional errors that were found and corrected. Now, bear in mind, this is supposedly given by divine beings. Now, the Urantia site does list them all exhaustively. Among them are, the Last Supper. The account changes from 12 apostles to the apostles. Because remember, after the end of the Last Supper, when Judas had gone to betray, there were only 11 apostles there. Well, the Urantia originally said that the 12 apostles were there. Well, later on, they edited it to the apostles. So a divine being told them that there were 12 apostles there. Either that, or a divine being told them something and a human added something to it. Whichever one is the case, the Urantia is not divine. That's a clear-cut case. Now, the wise men visited Jesus in the manger, but later on the Urantia tells us that Jesus was visited in the inn. Well, there aren't mangers in an inn. There are only mangers in a stable. So the Urantia was contradicting itself, which is another violation of truth. If all these guys were doing was making, grammatical changes such as, and punctuation, how did all these crazy words get in here? That's what I want to know. And why why do they worry about, when you go to the list of the terms that were changed in the Urantia, they're listed exhaustively. I mean, if they change a period to an apostrophe, it's noted in there. But what happens is you're basically masking the cat poo with the kitty litter. You, it's like all of these punctuational things and all these spelling and verb tenses that were changed. Well, you've got to scroll through dozens and dozens of those to find one instance of the problematic ones. You know, I wish they would list them in a little more clear way. They call themselves the truth book, but they like to hide their truth in that way, in that manner. And I'm in no way, I don't want to be a critic. I don't want to sit down and just say, oh, nope, that's a false book. Let me show you how to prove it wrong. I'm simply putting it up against Scripture here. Scripture says truth, and it's failing at truth also. Despite the incorporation of human authorship, the Urantia Foundation and its followers maintain that the Urantia is a revelationary book. They call it a revelatory book. Now, the problem with that is computer-aided testing of the Urantia has positively identified 120 different works that were plagiarized in the use of the Urantia. And I use the word plagiarize by its definition. I'm sure that there will be comments about this by people who like the Urantia, and I welcome that. I'll be glad to talk about that. They claimed to reveal, but they stole the content. Yes. These works existed everywhere from the mid-1800s to the early 1900s, and some were incorporated into it after the process of publishing went on. Now, do you see a problem with that? We have something else, that another mutually exclusive term. Not only are truth and revelation mutually exclusive, but revelation and plagiarism are mutually exclusive. I cannot reveal something to you that has already been revealed in writing. I'm not a revelator. I just brought you the revelation that already existed. And I'm sorry, but that's not, that is just the most nonsense claim I have ever heard in all of my days. You know, the Urantia claims that revelation may only occur by celestial beings. This is how it gets around this. It can only be made by those beings if a human somewhere already knows the information. It goes on to tell us, therefore, the information may be, changed later. In other words, it can give us the wrong revelation as long as it's something a human thinks. That is not revelation. That is a failure at truth. That is all that is. In other words, you had no divine authority to bring truth. You had whatever authority was in you to bring us rehashed, plagiarized works. That's it. So the Urantia also tells us that there were over 1,000 works that were looked at and incorporated into it, but none of them are cited. None of them are referred. In fact, it's a work of criminal art, but yet people follow it as though it is revelation.